The human had never planned to stand so close to an alien throne. He was not a soldier, not a hero, not even an important leader. He was only an assistant sent along because he could read old documents and follow instructions carefully. His job was simple: observe, listen, record. Do not speak unless asked. Do not offend. Do not touch anything. Above all, do not make mistakes. The chamber itself was overwhelming. The ceiling rose high above, shaped like smooth stone waves, glowing softly with light that did not come from lamps or fire. Tall alien figures stood on both sides of a long path, their armor polished and ceremonial rather than meant for battle. Their eyes followed every movement the humans made. The air felt heavy, not because of gravity, but because of history. This place had seen wars, coronations, and judgments that decided the fate of entire worlds. The human delegation moved forward slowly. Each step echoed louder than it should have. The assistant kept his hands folded in front of him, just as he had practiced. His heart beat fast, but his face stayed calm. He reminded himself again and again that he was only here to support the main speaker. Nothing more. At the end of the path sat the empress. She was unlike anything the human had imagined. She did not shout or demand attention. She did not move when they entered. She simply sat, tall and still, her posture straight, her presence filling the room without effort. Her eyes were sharp, ancient, and unreadable. This was a being who had ruled for many cycles, who had made choices that shaped the stars. The main speaker began the formal greeting, carefully repeating words that had been studied for months. Every sentence had been checked by translators, cultural experts, and historians. This meeting was meant to open peaceful relations between humanity and the Empire. One wrong word could end everything. The assistant stood just behind the speaker, holding a small data slate. His job was to signal if something was missed or misread. He listened closely, matching the spoken words with the notes he carried. Then something went wrong. A pause came earlier than expected. The speaker hesitated, glancing back slightly. It was small, but the assistant noticed. A line had been skipped. A response was required, according to the script. The speaker did not see it in time. Without thinking, the assistant stepped half a pace forward. It was a mistake made in a heartbeat. He remembered the instruction tied to that moment. A phrase of respect. A gesture meant to show peaceful intent. He spoke the words softly, clearly, and made the motion with his hand, lowering his head in what he believed was a simple sign of honor. The room changed instantly. The soft hum of the chamber seemed to fade. The guards straightened. A ripple of movement passed through the alien court. Some figures turned their heads sharply toward the throne. Others froze where they stood. The assistant felt it before he understood it. Something was very wrong. The empress leaned forward. Her eyes locked onto him, not with anger, but with sudden focus. The kind of focus that made the air feel tight in his chest. He straightened slowly, confusion spreading across his face. He opened his mouth to step back, to apologize, but before he could speak, a deep voice echoed through the chamber. An official, standing near the throne, spoke loudly in the alien language. The translators hesitated, then began converting the words into human speech. The phrase hit the human delegation like a physical blow. A proposal of binding union has been formally declared. The assistant's mind went blank. He looked around, certain he had misunderstood. A proposal, a union. That could not be right. He had only spoken a respectful line. He had practiced it dozens of times. The human leaders began whispering urgently among themselves. Some looked pale. Others looked furious. One of them reached for the assistant's arm, as if to pull him back, but stopped when several guards shifted their stance. The empress rose from her throne. She stood taller than any human in the room. Her expression remained calm, but there was something else now. Interest, consideration, the weight of decision. She spoke again, slowly, with authority. "I accept." The words, once translated, seemed unreal. The assistant felt his knees weaken. He did not collapse, but it took all his strength to stay standing. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His thoughts raced. This had to be a mistake. A translation error. A misunderstanding layered on top of another misunderstanding. The lead human official tried to speak, his voice shaking as he requested clarification. He explained quickly that the assistant had no authority, that the gesture was unintentional, that no proposal was meant. The empress listened without interrupting. When he finished, she raised one hand. Silence fell again. "Intent does not erase tradition," she said. The words were spoken. The gesture was made, witnessed by the court. According to our law, this was a formal request. The assistant felt every eye in the room turn toward him. Alien nobles, guards, translators, and humans alike stared as if he were suddenly someone else entirely. Someone dangerous. Someone important. He wanted to disappear. He bowed deeply, lower than before, his voice trembling as he spoke carefully. He apologized. He explained his role. He admitted ignorance of the deeper meaning. He did everything he could think of to undo the moment. The empress watched him closely. There was no anger in her face, no mockery, only thought. "You did not act with arrogance," she said at last. "You did not seek power. That is clear." She turned slightly, addressing her court. "The law allows refusal only if insult or deception is proven." "I see neither." A low murmur spread through the chamber. Some faces showed approval. Others showed shock. A few showed clear displeasure. The assistant's chest felt tight. He realized that this was no longer about him alone. This was about rules older than humanity. Rules that could not be bent just because a human had made an honest mistake. The empress looked back at him. "You may speak," she said. He swallowed hard. His voice was quiet but steady. "I meant no disrespect. I did not know. If there is any way to correct this without harm to your people or mine, I ask for it." For the first time, something like a smile touched the empress's expression. It was brief, subtle, but real. "Correction is not always removal," she replied. "Sometimes it is understanding." She then ordered a recess. The guards stepped back. Officials began speaking rapidly. The humans were escorted to a side chamber, their faces pale and tense. As the assistant walked, his legs felt heavy, as if gravity itself had changed. He replayed the moment again and again in his head, wishing he could reach back in time and stop himself from stepping forward. He had come as nobody. In one careless second, he had become something else entirely. And somewhere behind him, in the vast throne room, the alien empress watched the door close, her expression thoughtful, as ancient laws and unexpected curiosity began to intertwine. The room they were taken to was smaller than the throne chamber, but it felt heavier. The walls were smooth and dark, with faint lines of light running through them like veins. No guard stood inside, but the presence of control was everywhere. The door closed without a sound, sealing the humans in. The assistant sat down slowly, his hands shaking. His breathing was shallow, as if the air itself had become thinner. Around him, the human officials spoke in low, urgent voices. Some were angry. Some were afraid. A few simply stared at the floor, as if hoping this was all a bad dream. One of the senior officials finally turned toward him. The look on his face was not cruel, but it was sharp. "Do you understand what you did?" he asked quietly. The assistant nodded. "I understand that I made a mistake. I didn't know what it meant. I thought I was fixing a pause. A heavy silence followed. You didn't just fix a pause, another official said. You triggered something that can't be undone easily. Their laws are not like ours. The assistant rubbed his palms together, trying to ground himself. Then tell me what happens now. No one answered right away. Before anyone could speak, the door opened again. An alien official entered, taller than any human, wearing robes instead of armor. Its voice was calm, almost gentle when translated. The Empress has ordered a private audience. The human who spoke will attend. Every human in the room looked at the assistant. His stomach dropped. The official waited, unmoving. There was no anger in its posture, but there was no room for refusal either. The assistant stood up. His legs felt weak, but he forced himself to walk. As he followed the official through long, curved halls, his mind raced. He thought of Earth, of how small his life had been, of how a single sentence, spoken without thought, had pushed him into something far beyond his control. They entered a quieter chamber. This one was not grand. No throne, no court. Only a wide-open space, with soft light and a single raised platform. The Empress stood there alone. Up close, she seemed even more unreal. Not monstrous, not gentle, just powerful in a quiet way. Her eyes rested on him as if she could see every thought he was trying to hide. "You are afraid," she said. He nodded. "Yes, that is reasonable." She gestured for him to stand where he was. No kneeling, no formal posture. "You did not plan to bind yourself to an empire," she continued. "Yet you did not lie when you spoke. That matters." He took a breath. "I would never insult your people on purpose. If there is punishment meant for me alone, I will accept it. But please don't let this damage the peace talks." The Empress tilted her head slightly. "You worry for your people before yourself." "I was sent to serve," he replied. "Not to rule, not to gain anything." She studied him in silence. The quiet stretched long enough to make his heart pound in his ears. "Among my kind," she said at last, "those who seek power usually announce it loudly. They demand attention. You did none of that." She walked slowly in a circle around him. He stayed still, aware of every step she took. "Our law is strict," she continued. "A proposal made before witnesses binds both sides. Refusal by the throne is allowed only under specific conditions." He swallowed. "And my mistake doesn't count as one." "No," she said simply. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. "Then why accept so quickly?" Her answer came without hesitation. "Because the law gives me a choice, not an escape. And because I wanted to see the truth of you without the eyes of the court." That surprised him. He looked up, meeting her gaze. "You are not what my advisors expected," she said. And neither was this moment. He let out a slow breath. "I don't know how to be what you expect." "That may be your greatest strength," she replied. She explained then, in calm, clear terms. The union did not mean immediate rule. It did not mean ownership or control. It meant obligation, presence, learning, observation. It meant that he would remain within the empire while formal processes unfolded. "You will be given protection," she said, "and scrutiny. You will be watched." "I already feel watched," he said honestly. A faint hint of amusement crossed her face. "You may speak freely here," she told him. "This space is not a court." He hesitated, then nodded. "Then I need to ask something." "Ask. Why would your empire accept someone like me? I have no title, no strength, no importance." She stopped in front of him. "You believe importance comes from position. We believe it comes from action." He didn't know how to respond to that dot. The meeting ended without ceremony. He was escorted to living quarters within the inner complex. They were comfortable but clearly controlled. The door did not lock, but he knew he was not free to leave. Hours passed. He sat alone, replaying every word. Fear slowly mixed with something else. Confusion. Curiosity. Days followed. He was given lessons. Language guidance. Cultural explanations. He learned how close he had come to disaster. He learned how ancient the law was. How many wars had started because of broken tradition. He also learned that the empress had refused multiple proposals in the past. That fact stayed with him. He saw her again in short, structured meetings. Never alone again, but never distant either. She asked him questions about Earth, not politics, not weapons. Small things, music, weather, family structures. He answered honestly, sometimes awkwardly. Slowly. The fear eased just enough for him to think clearly. He realized something important. She was not treating him like a prize. She was studying him. And in that careful attention, he felt the weight of something growing. Not romance, not control, responsibility. What had begun as an accident was no longer just a mistake waiting to be erased. It was becoming a path, one he had never chosen, but one he was now walking, step by step, under the watchful eyes of an empress who had accepted far more than words spoken in error. Life inside the imperial complex settled into a strange routine. Days were measured not by clocks, but by scheduled movements. Light shifted softly through the walls, changing color to signal rest, learning, or audience time. The assistant woke each cycle, unsure whether he was still a visitor or something else entirely. He was given clothing made for humans, simple and plain, yet clearly designed to mark him as separate. Not a prisoner, but not free either. When he walked the halls, guards moved with him, never touching, never speaking unless needed. Their presence felt less like threat and more like weight, a reminder that every step he took mattered. At first, he spoke very little. He answered questions when asked. He followed instructions carefully. He tried not to draw attention, but attention followed him anyway. Servants watched him from corners of their eyes. Officials paused conversations when he passed. Even those who did not know his role knew he was important now. For reasons they did not fully understand, lessons filled much of his time. Language came first. Not just words, but meaning. He learned how tone could change law, how posture could imply challenge or submission, how silence itself could carry more power than speech. Each mistake he learned about made him more aware of how dangerous ignorance could be in this place. One instructor, older and slower than the rest, explained customs without judgment. Through that teacher, the assistant learned how deep the union law truly ran. It was not romance. It was not ownership. It was balance. A symbolic binding meant to bring outside perspective into the heart of power. A reminder that rulers should never see only themselves reflected back. That idea stayed with him. He began to understand why the empress had not dismissed him immediately. The law was not only strict, it was intentional. Still, understanding did not make things easier. Whispers followed him now. Some were curious. Some were angry. A few were openly hostile. He could feel it when he entered shared spaces, a shift in the air, a tightening of expressions. To many nobles, he was an insult. A fragile outsider brought into sacred tradition by accident. He felt the pressure most strongly during his first appearance at a public court session. He did not speak. He did not stand near the throne. He sat in a designated place, lower and to the side. Even so, eyes turned toward him again and again. He kept his gaze forward, hands folded, breathing steady. The empress never looked at him directly during the session. Yet somehow, he always felt aware of her presence. Not watching exactly, knowing, afterward, As he returned to his quarters, one of the advisors stopped him. The figure was tall, posture rigid, voice sharp when translated. "You walk as if you belong," the advisor said. The assistant shook his head gently. "I don't feel that way." "That is obvious," the advisor replied. "But perception matters more than truth here. You should learn that quickly." "I am trying," he said honestly. The advisor studied him for a long moment, then turned away without another word. The encounter left the assistant unsettled, but it also confirmed something he had already sensed. He was standing in the center of political tension he barely understood. Days later, the Empress requested his presence again. This time, the meeting took place in a garden space inside the complex. Living plants grew in layered terraces, their colors deep and unfamiliar. Water flowed quietly through narrow channels. It was the first place since his arrival that felt calm. She stood near the water when he arrived. "You are learning," she said without greeting. "I'm trying to," he replied. She turned to face him. "Trying is visible. Many pretend instead." They walked slowly along the path. No guards followed closely. The space felt intentionally private. "You have been silent in court," she said. "I was told silence was safest," he answered. "For survival," she agreed. "Not for understanding." He hesitated. "I don't want to offend anyone." "That will happen regardless," she said calmly. "Your existence already does." That honesty startled him. She stopped walking and looked at him fully. "Tell me something. Not what you think I want to hear. What do you feel when you stand among my people?" He took a breath. Small, lost, afraid of causing harm without knowing it. She nodded once. "Good. Those feelings keep rulers from becoming monsters." He looked at her, surprised. "I'm not a ruler." "No," she said. "But you stand close enough to remind me of something I could forget." The words stayed with him long after the meeting ended. From that day on, she spoke to him more directly. Not often, but honestly. She explained pressures he had never imagined. Centuries of expectation. Endless balance between strength and mercy. The loneliness of being surrounded by voices that never truly disagreed. In return, she asked him about Earth, not about power or technology, but ordinary life. How people argued. How they forgave. How leaders were questioned. He told her about mistakes. About public anger. About leaders stepping down. About people demanding answers. She listened closely. Meanwhile, tension in the court grew. Some nobles openly challenged the situation. They did not accuse the Empress directly, but their words carried sharp edges. They spoke of tradition being diluted, of weakness disguised as law, of outsiders gaining influence they had not earned. The assistant felt responsible, even though he knew none of this had been his intention. He began to withdraw again, limiting his movements, avoiding gatherings when possible. One evening, he was stopped by a group of younger nobles. Their tone was polite, but their eyes were cold. "You should understand," one of them said, "that symbols matter here. You are becoming one." "I never wanted to," the assistant replied. "That does not matter," another said. "What matters is that some see you as a threat." "I have no power," he said quietly. The first noble leaned closer. "Power does not always look like force." They left him standing there, heart pounding. That night, sleep did not come easily. He realized something then. Whether he wanted it or not, he was already part of the Empire's story. Avoiding it would not protect anyone. It would only make things worse. The next time he was invited to a public session, he did something different. When a minor dispute arose, one involving resource distribution between outer systems, he raised his hand slightly. The room went still. The translators hesitated. No one had expected him to speak. The Empress looked at him. "You may speak," she said. His voice was steady, though his chest felt tight. He did not argue. He did not criticize. He asked a simple question, one that reframed the problem in terms of shared impact rather than control. The silence that followed was long. Then discussion resumed, changed in tone. Afterward, several officials approached him. Not with anger. With curiosity. The empress said nothing to him that day. But as he left the chamber, he felt it again. That sense of knowing. Later, alone in his quarters, he finally understood the truth he had been avoiding. He was no longer just surviving this situation. He was becoming part of it. And whether the empire accepted him or rejected him in the end, his presence had already begun to shift something small but important, not because he was strong, but because he was human. The change did not happen loudly. It arrived quietly, like a shift in air pressure before a storm. The assistant felt it before anyone said it out loud. Guards began moving more often through the halls. Meetings lasted longer. Whispers turned sharper. Smiles became rare. Something was building. He noticed it during one of the public sessions. The discussion was calm on the surface, but tension sat beneath every word. Several high-ranking nobles questioned decisions that had already been settled. They spoke of tradition, of strength, of the danger of appearing uncertain. No one mentioned him directly, but every sentence seemed to circle around. His presence like a blade testing distance. The empress listened without interruption. Her face remained calm, but the room felt strained. The assistant sat quietly in his place, hands folded, his mind racing. He could feel eyes turning toward him again, measuring, judging. After the session ended, he was not escorted back to his quarters immediately. Instead, an official led him through a different path, deeper into the complex. The walls here were older, marked with symbols worn smooth by time. The empress waited in a small chamber, standing rather than seated. "You feel it," she said before he could speak. "Yes," he replied. "Something is wrong. Something is changing," she corrected. "Some believe it should not." She did not hide the truth from him. She explained that a faction within the empire saw his presence as proof that the throne had grown weak. They claimed that accepting an outsider, especially one with no power or lineage, threatened the order that had kept the empire stable for generations. "They want you removed," he said quietly. "They want the symbol removed," she replied. "You are part of it now." His chest tightened. "If I leave, would it end this?" She looked at him for a long moment. "If you disappear without explanation, it will confirm every accusation they are making." He understood then. Running would not save anyone. The following days were tense. Travel within the complex was restricted. Guards doubled near the throne chamber. Messages moved quickly between officials. The assistant was advised to remain in his quarters, but he refused to hide completely. He continued attending sessions when allowed. He greeted those who would look at him. He stayed calm, even when hostility showed openly. One evening, as he walked back alone from a language lesson, the lights in the corridor dimmed unexpectedly. The sound of footsteps echoed behind him. He turned slowly, heart pounding. 3 figures stood at the far end of the hall. Not guards, nobles. "You should not be here alone," one of them said. "I was told this corridor was safe," the assistant replied, keeping his voice steady. "Safe is a matter of perspective," another answered. They did not threaten him directly. They did not raise their voices. That made it worse. "You are a disruption," the first said. "You bring uncertainty into a system built on order." "I never asked for this," the assistant said honestly. "No one believes that anymore," the third replied. Before he could respond, guards appeared from both ends of the corridor. The nobles stepped back, expressions neutral once more. Nothing had happened officially. Yet the message was clear. That night, sleep did not come. The next cycle, everything moved faster. A formal challenge was raised in the council. It was presented as concern for the empire's future, but the intent was obvious. The empress's judgment was being questioned. Not openly defied, but tested. The assistant watched from his place as arguments unfolded. Voices rose. Old laws were quoted. Past rulers were invoked. The air felt heavy, like it could break. Then something unexpected happened. The empress stood. The room fell silent. She did not defend herself. She did not justify her choice. Instead, she spoke about responsibility, about the danger of rulers who never listen, about strength that comes from balance. Not fear. Then she did something that shocked everyone. She asked the assistant to stand beside her. His heart nearly stopped. He rose slowly, aware of every eye in the chamber. The distance between his seat and the throne felt longer than it ever had. When he reached her side, he did not feel powerful. He felt exposed. "Look at him," the empress said to the court. "This is the threat you fear." The silence was sharp. "He commands no armies," she continued. "He holds no titles. He has demanded nothing from me or this empire. Yet you speak of him as if he were a conqueror." Murmurs spread. "He is dangerous only because he reminds us that power can exist without cruelty." Some nobles looked away. Others stared harder. The session ended without resolution. But lines had been drawn. Later that day, the assistant was summoned urgently. The empress met him in a secure chamber, her expression serious. "They are moving faster now," she said. "Some are pushing toward open defiance." "What can I do?" he asked. She answered without hesitation. "Stay." He blinked. "That's all." "That is everything," she replied. That night, alarms sounded, not loud sirens. Subtle signals. Lights shifted color. Guards moved quickly through the halls. The assistant was escorted to a protected area, but he refused to remain there. He insisted on staying near the empress. "You are not trained for this," an officer warned. "I know," he said, "but running will only prove them right." The empress allowed it. The confrontation came not as violence, but as declaration. A group of nobles arrived at the throne chamber, demanding an emergency ruling. Their tone was sharp, their words carefully chosen. They accused the throne of ignoring tradition and endangering the empire. The assistant stood quietly behind the empress. His hands were shaking, but his posture was firm. When the accusations ended, the empress turned to him. "Speak," she said. The chamber froze. He had not prepared for this. No script, no protection. Just truth. He stepped forward. "I don't belong here," he said simply. "I know that better than anyone." Some nobles scoffed. "I made a mistake," he continued. "A human one. And instead of hiding it, your ruler faced it openly." He looked around the room, meeting eyes where he could. "If that is weakness, then maybe weakness is not what you think." The silence that followed was deep. "I have seen leaders who refuse to listen," he said. "They surround themselves with agreement until everything breaks. Your empire is strong because it survived long enough to question itself." He stepped back. No applause followed. No cheers, but something shifted. The challenge dissolved slowly. Not defeated, not victorious, but exposed. The nobles withdrew, knowing that pushing further would divide the empire openly. When it was over, the assistant felt exhausted. His legs nearly gave out. Later, alone with the empress, he finally let out the breath he had been holding for days. "You could have been hurt," she said quietly. "So could you," he replied. She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw relief in her eyes. "You chose to stand," she said. "I chose not to run," he answered. Outside, the empire remained uncertain. The tension had not vanished, but something important had been proven. The assistant was no longer just an accident. He was a choice. And the empress, standing beside him in the aftermath, knew that whatever came next would not be decided by fear alone. The days after the confrontation felt strangely quiet. Not peaceful, but calm in a careful way, like the empire itself was holding its breath. Guards returned to normal patrols. Meetings resumed their usual rhythm. No one spoke openly about what had happened, yet everyone felt the change it had caused. The assistant noticed it first in small ways. When he walked through the halls, fewer eyes followed him with anger. Some still avoided him, but others nodded politely. A few even greeted him, not warmly, but with respect. He remained careful. He did not let pride settle in his chest. He knew how fragile his position still was. One wrong move could undo everything. The empress did not summon him for several cycles. That worried him more than constant meetings ever had. He returned to his lessons, his quiet routines, his long moments of thought alone. He replayed his words from the chamber again and again, wondering if he had said too much or not enough. Then one evening, an official arrived at his quarters. "The Empress requests your presence," the translation said. This time, there was no urgency in the tone, no tension in the air, just formality. He followed through familiar corridors until they reached a hall he had never entered before. The space was open and bright, with wide windows that looked out over the capital city. Towers rose in smooth curves. Lights moved like slow stars. It was the first time he had truly seen the empire beyond its walls. The empress stood near the window, her hands resting calmly at her sides. "You see them now," she said, without turning. "Yes," he replied. "I've never been shown this view." "Few are," she said. "Rulers should remember what they protect." She turned to face him. "The council has concluded its review," she said. "The challenge has ended." He felt his shoulders relax slightly. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, "we decide what this union truly means." He swallowed. "I don't want to be a symbol that divides your people." "You are already a symbol," she replied. "The question is what kind." She explained what the council had agreed upon. The law would be upheld. The union would be recognized publicly, not as a romantic claim, but as a partnership of perspective. He would not rule. He would not command. But he would remain beside the throne as an observer and voice, someone allowed to question without threatening authority. "A reminder," she said, "that power should be seen from more than one angle." He listened carefully, absorbing the weight of it all. "And if I refuse?" he asked quietly. She met his gaze. "Then you will leave as you arrived, alive, honored, and used as proof by those who fear change." He understood. This choice was not only about him. He thought of Earth, of his quiet life before all this, of how small his world had been. He thought of the moment he had stepped forward without thinking, and how that single act had reshaped everything. "I will stay," he said, "but only if I'm allowed to remain honest, even when it's uncomfortable." A pause followed. "That," the empress said, "is exactly why I accepted." The announcement was made days later. The throne chamber filled once again, not with tension this time, but anticipation. The assistant stood beside the empress as the declaration was read. He felt the weight of the moment pressing against his chest, but he did not falter. The words were formal, ancient, clear. The union was confirmed, not as conquest, not as surrender, but as intent. When it was over, the reaction was not loud. No cheers, no outrage, just quiet acceptance mixed with uncertainty. Change rarely arrived with comfort. In the cycles that followed, his role became clearer. He attended discussions. He listened more than he spoke. When he did speak, it was with care. He asked questions others avoided. He pointed out consequences others ignored. Sometimes he was dismissed. Sometimes he was heard. The empress never defended him openly again. She did not need to. His presence spoke for itself now. They spoke often in private, not as ruler and subject, but as two beings carrying different burdens. She spoke of isolation, of how power narrowed the world until only duty remained. He spoke of doubt, of fear, of how strange it was to matter so much without meaning to. "You remind me of who I was before the throne," she admitted once. "And you remind me," he replied, "that strength doesn't always need force." The empire began to shift slowly, not because of him alone, but because his presence made conversations possible that had once been forbidden. Other voices grew braver. Younger officials asked questions instead of repeating tradition blindly. There was resistance. There always was, but it no longer ruled the room. One evening, standing again by the window overlooking the city, the empress spoke quietly. "When you spoke that day," she said, "you did not defend me. You defended the idea that power should listen." He nodded. "It's the only reason it survives." She looked out over the lights. "Then this union has meaning beyond law." Time passed. Months, then longer. The assistant no longer felt like a visitor. He still did not belong completely, but he no longer felt lost. Messages from Earth arrived occasionally. Confusion, curiosity, debate. He answered what he could. He never painted himself as a hero. He told the truth. He had made a mistake, and then he had stayed. On the day the union was formally marked in the empire's records, there was no grand celebration, no spectacle, just a quiet acknowledgement in the chamber. As they stood together, the empress turned to him. "Do you regret it?" she asked. He thought carefully. "I regret not understanding sooner," he said, "but not staying." She inclined her head slightly. Respect. In that moment, he realized something important. This story would be told for generations. Some would twist it. Some would simplify it. Some would turn it into myth. But he knew the truth. It was never about a proposal. It was about a human who chose responsibility over escape, and an empress who chose understanding over fear. Together, they did not change the empire overnight. They simply reminded it how to listen. And sometimes, that is how real change begins.